What's going on, everybody? This is the Black Trekker. Thank you for taking time out your morning, afternoon, or evening to sit in with me for a few ticks as I talk to you about Season 3, Episode 4, No-Win Scenario from Star Trek Picard. I'm going to tell you about the likes, the dislikes that I had with watching this episode and tell you what you should look for when you watch the episode. So here we go. Basically, in this episode, it shows 5 years prior, Admiral Picard is at some kind of restaurant. He gets approached by a bunch of junior officers, and they start asking him a bunch of questions. Now, initially, Admiral Picard was trying to, brush them off and be able to say, listen, I don't really answer questions. But then he realizes that very quickly on that he's a celebrity. He realizes that he's a person of interest throughout Starfleet history, and it would be basically rude for him not to engage in a conversation with these junior officers. So basically, one junior officer broached the question to him about how he dealt with the Herosians coming into the Alpha Quadrant. He said at the time, him and Worf devised the plan of being able how to deal with the Herosians, and he turned the hunters into prey. And he got a lot of fanfare from that, and they were praising him. And then what happens is that it goes back to present day. And Captain Riker is talking about how the ship is basically dead and how the ship is running out of power and how the ship is also falling deeper and deeper into this nebula's gravity well. And they're not exactly sure what's going on with the nebula's gravity well. But for whatever reason, it's happening. So they start diverting certain power systems, like from engineering, from artificial gravity, from also the impulse manifolds, just to try to be able to make it where they're able to sustain themselves for a longer period of time. And then also be able to divert power from the shields too, because they're getting hit by these asteroids that are inside of the actual nebula. Now, as things progress forward, what occurs is that they start to discover that from the previous episode that there's a saboteur on board. And Commander 7 discovers this. So Commander 7 tells Captain Riker that there's a saboteur on board. Captain Riker is kind of like, let's keep this on the low, let's keep this quiet, let's not make this public knowledge, because if we make this public knowledge, then the saboteur is effectively going to have a free reign to do whatever they want to do on the ship, because of the fact that it's going to be mass panic. So with that being said, Seven goes and starts talking to Captain Shaw. Now, although Captain Shaw is a bit brazen and also disrespectful, he's also real versed on the crew because he approved majority of the people getting transferred to the ship. So she goes to him and she starts talking about this and starts talking about ways in order to be able to detect the changeling. Now, he knows more about changelings than she does. Although 7 and 9 was in the Delta Quadrant, she didn't have any kind of experience with the changelings directly. Now, based off her memory, she had experience with the changelings in the sense that the Borg were aware of the changelings, but the Borg didn't have direct interaction. I think, quite personally, if the Borg did have interactions with them, it would have been difficult to kind of assimilate the hierarchy of the changelings, of the Great Link. But I think that the Borg probably would have neutralized the Jem'Hadar and the Volta, the Vorta, quite easily. But anyway, going through this episode, what happens is that Captain Riker tells Admiral Picard, listen, this is the end, my friend. And after a period of time, numerous decades of being together, they're friends now. Picard is retired as an admiral, and Captain Riker is kind of on a sabbatical. Although in the previous episode, Captain Shaw gave him the command codes of the Titan and made him prompt to captain, just temporarily because he was injured and he was probably going to be out of there. But thankfully, he survived thanks to the medical technology of the 25th century, and he was able to be in recovery. So, with that being said, he tells him, hey, you might want to get your affairs in order and go talk to your son because you have no relationship with him whatsoever. So Picard takes it to heart, and Picard goes to sick bay where Beverly Crusher is there and Jack is there. Now, Beverly Crusher is doing something quite interesting. She's tending to the injured, but she's also observing a pattern of behavior with this nebula. This nebula is acting weird because it's having electrical and also biological eruptions. And she's getting it down to the point of being able to say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's happening, but it's happening at a faster rate. Like the first eruptions was like 7, 8 hours, and now it's like 5, 6 hours, and like 4, 3 hours, and basically it's starting to get obvious. So anyway, Picard goes in there and he's like, "Hey, listen, can I talk to Jack for a little bit, for a couple of minutes?" And then what happens is that Picard and Jack, they go into the holodeck. Now, for whatever reason, this 10 forward holodeck place that Picard goes to that reminds him of Guinan is like a staple in this series because he takes him there. Now, this is an emergency shelter in place location. Apparently the holodecks are where a lot of people congregate. And the logic is that Captain Riker was like, "Listen, we are going to probably have to lower shields, and then we're going to have to also lower life support to a really critical level. So things are going to get cold in the ship." Now, this is my question for everybody that's watching this, that watch Star Trek. How does a ship the size of the Titan, even when you turn off life support is to keep the ship interior, I don't know what the actual temperature would be, but I'm assuming like 70 degrees at least. But even with that being the case, the ship will get cold based off of the temperature of outer space. How do they run out of air so fast? I mean, seriously, I know you have to account for carbon monoxide poisoning, but seriously, how do you run out of air so fast? I mean, for real, for a ship that's well over 2,000 feet in length, you're telling me that you're going to run out of air that fast in a couple of minutes? No, I know this might be a creative writer's plot, but that doesn't make any logical sense to me. And I'm not even an engineer, but come on now, let's get serious. So anyone in the comment section, please explain to me how a ship that is that big and comprised of close to 40-something decks runs out of air that fast. I mean, I can imagine it getting cold relatively quickly, but running out of air, come on now, let's get serious. Also, the next thing is as it progresses, then they start talking about, his history. Picard starts having a conversation with his son, Jack. Now, again, there hasn't been no real DNA test done. So I'm still speculative that that's really Picard's son. Just saying. But anyway, they start having a conversation. The conversation gets to the point where Jack starts asking, "Well, listen, I really don't need this. I don't really need to be sitting here and trying to have a conversation with you and recollecting about the past. But I do have a question. What was the sticky situation that you was in when you were, younger?" And then he also asked beforehand, he's like, "Well, when do you lose your hair?" And he's like, "Well, how old are you now?" He was like, "I'm 23, 24. And he was like, "Okay, well," and Picard is saying, "Enjoy it, because you're going to go bald too if you my son. It's hereditary." Anyway, so he starts talking to him about how him and his namesake, his father, Jack Crusher, were trying to talk to some women from a planet. And one thing I would say about this Star Trek series that's on right now is that it's really incorporating aspects from 21st century regular societal norms. I mean, they're using a lot more profanity, and they're also engaging in discussions that are completely outside of the normal paradigm of Star Trek. This used to be a family show, and now it's talking about getting laid. Just saying. Anyway, so basically him and Jack were going to go to this planet to sleep with these two random women. And whatever happens, they get involved in some kind of meteor shower. The meteor shower damages the shuttle. And then they basically have to use reserve power to limp back to their starship. Whatever. I call BS on that. It's the 24th century, and you telling me y'all ran into an asteroid and y'all didn't see it coming? Whatever. That sounds crazy, but whatever. So then Captain Shaw comes in, and Captain Shaw is talking about Jack's mother and talking about how she's like, I guess, real liberal with the medication. And so he's basically like, listen, he was like, me and your father, we already met. Picard didn't remember. But Picard had an impact on a lot of people that he didn't remember, especially people that have been in Starfleet for like 25 years. And Shaw, I don't know his exact age, but Shaw been in Starfleet for at least 20 years, easy. So anyway, what happens is that, 25, 30 years. Anyway, what happens is that Shaw starts going in on Picard talking about, hey, you may not know, but your dad I met him at a thing called Wolf 359. Now, everybody know what Wolf 359 was. That was when they engaged, the Borg actually made it to the Sol system, and 44 starships got destroyed by that one Borg cube. There's a lot of reasons why they got destroyed. One of the main reasons is that they had antiquated starships trying to fight a Borg cube. I mean, they had, what kind of ships did they have? They had old berths trying to fight they had old berths, science vessels trying to fight a Borg cube. What? They had old outdated Miranda-class starships trying to fight a Borg cube. That was dumb. Matter of fact, the Admiral that was in charge, he was on a Excelsior-class starship, and he was trying to fight the Borg. Are you serious? That's why they really got their butt whooped. But anyway, I digress. So what I will say is that he was upset. And he was like, yeah, 11,000 people died because of your daddy. Your daddy was so good at killing, they gave him they like to say the GD too much in this TV show. But he was like, your daddy, he got so good at killing, they gave him a damn name as Locutus a Borg. And so Picard, he's looking all sad and all like, oh my goodness, he brought this up. And so you can pan back to Jack, and Jack is looking like he's surprised. But why would you be surprised when your mama's Beverly Crusher? She's a doctor. She know what happened. Now, this is the thing. Shaw was like, oh, well, it was a good little point because it talked about how Shaw was basically a grease monkey. He wasn't nobody important, and he was from Chicago. I didn't know that. And basically he said that they were starting to fight amongst themselves about who could get into the escape pod. The escape pod has 10 seats. It's 30 people. So finally a lieutenant, somebody who had actual rank, came down and started pointing people, and he was number 10. And he was kind of trying to understand. He was kind of shocked that he had got picked because he was nobody. But that lieutenant pulled rank and made sure that everybody that was, I guess, important or mattered got on the ship. Got on the escape pod. And so Picard was like, I understand. And Picard walked away. And his son chased after him. Now, this is my problem. This is my problem. My problem is this. Yes, Picard took part in the massacre at Wolf 359. But a lot of people aren't giving Picard empathy because of the simple fact that he was forced, keyword, forced to do it by the Borg. He didn't have any individual freedom. He didn't have the right to be able to say, I don't want to do this. They made him do it. They manipulated him to do it. They made him do horrific things. So with that being said, if he does horrific things against his will, then how in turn can you get upset at him? Now, I know you can't get upset with the Borg proper and say, oh, Borg, you're getting it, because the Borg not going to care. The Borg not going to care in the 25th century. And the Borg are, as Captain Shaw said, the Borg are still a very real thing in the 25th century. So with that being said, he was off. But my problem is that Picard don't never respond. He always acts so weak about it. I would have went off on Shaw. I would have been like, dude, I didn't have no choice. My humanity got stripped from me. I had to use my knowledge to kill my fellow officers. I mean, because like when he met, Commander Sisko had the exact same feeling that Shaw has. And am I saying that they're out of line for having that? No, because it's human nature. But let's use some common sense. Y'all are intelligent Starfleet officers. Rational in thinking to an extent. Let's be civil and let's be serious. That man didn't have no choice. He couldn't fight the Borg. They were using advanced technologies that he couldn't resist. I'm sure he probably tried to kill himself. They revived him. So let's not beat up Picard too heavily because he ain't have no choice. Anyway, Picard walks out. He's in the corridor with Jack. Jack tries to console him. Picard taps him on the shoulder and is like, I really am glad that we had this conversation, Jack. And he walked off. And so what happens is now Onica is looking for the changeling. Her and also Captain Shaw. They discover that, based off of what Captain Shaw says, is that changelings have to revert into a gelatinous state. Gelatinous state meaning they have to revert to a liquid. And that liquid allows them to be able to regenerate because they can't hold solid form forever. And I'm not going to say forever like always, but like for a couple of hours. You know, they need to just be liquid. So now they're just looking for it. And now they also have a situation where they're trying to be able to figure out what's going on. So, thanks to Dr. Beverly Crusher, they do find out what's going on. The pulses that are being produced by this nebula are similar to contractions of a woman giving birth. So they surmise that something's about to happen because these pulses are getting more and more frequent. So there's probably be a birth. Perhaps this nebula is changing into something else. And it's Dr. Beverly Crusher, Admiral Picard, Jack Crusher, and also Captain Riker. Now, Captain Riker is trying to figure out what's going on. He thinks it's the end, but thankfully, they're able to persuade him. Picard is saying, if it's going to be time for us to go, let's do what we do best. We the best at what we do, basically. We Starfleet. We get out of stuff all the time. And that's another thing that I have a problem with the behavior of Captain Riker. He's acting like this is his first time being in no-win scenarios. This is the first time he's dealing with an adversary that got a ship that's stronger and better and more technologically advanced. No, you fought the Borg, dude. Let's get serious. You fought the Borg. But again, what do I know? I'm just a grease monkey from Virginia. Anyway, I'm going to say this to you guys. This right here proves that whoever's writing this episode is making Riker look extremely weak compared to how he was when he was younger. Anyway, he finally gets a level of confidence back based off of what Picard stated, and he starts talking about the impulse manifolds being opened up so they could collect a large amount of energy. But what they also did was they did a level of misdirection. He made a speech to the crew basically saying, hey, listen, we about to go and try to use the impulse manifolds opening up. It's definitely going to be a bumpy ride. Hey, I hope this works. If it does, then, we're going to be good. If it doesn't work, then, it's been a pleasure serving with you. So what happens is that Admiral Picard and Commander 7 go to Captain Shaw's bedroom and basically say, hey, listen, Admiral Picard basically says, hey, you are a dipshit from Chicago. And I guess that was his kind of like his comeback for saying what he said in the Tim Ford facsimile on the holodeck. I think that was weak. I think he should have just said what he wanted to say when he was there on the holodeck to Shaw. It would have been a lot better. But anyway, Shaw, he was like, okay, cool. And he was like, listen, I need your help because of the fact that you are a grease monkey. And Shaw picked up on it. He was like, oh, so you want me to hot rod the actual impulse manifolds so we could go at full speed for impulse? Because this is what they was trying to do. They was trying to be able to use the actual wave that's coming as kind of like pushing the ship to full power. Because the energy, when they open up the impulse manifolds, the energy from the actual explosion from the contractions will be able to power the warp core and help them to go back to warp. Now, I don't know how they figure that out, but then again, they Starfleet, whatever. So they start doing it. They go to the engineering. Captain Shaw and also Commander 7 are trying to, fix everything up. But see, they smart. They know that the saboteur more than likely is going to come to the actual engineering section because they've made this a ship-wide broadcast. And you're going to have to do it from the engineering section. So guess what happens? Captain Shaw is telling Commander 7 to go to the opposite side of the engineering bay. All right, and then guess who come out of nowhere? Ensign LaForge. Now, Ensign LaForge in the previous scene was on the bridge. So we know this ain't regular Ensign LaForge. And so Captain Shaw is like, Ensign LaForge, what you doing out here? And Ensign LaForge responded by saying, oh, I was told to come down here and help. And he was like, okay, well, hand me that power torch right there. And so he, the changeling is going to go hand the torch to Captain Shaw. And reaching down was like, well, if one impulse manifold is open, we'll still be able to go to warp. And Shaw tricked him or whoever, by saying, yeah, we'll still be able to go to warp when you actually need to. And so what happened was he was like, you gonna hand it to me? And he was pointing the torch. And thankfully, Commander 7 came out of nowhere and was like, drop it. And so the changeling put the torch back down on the counter and was like, hey, what's going on, Commander? And it was like, she was like, Commander what? Oh, it was like, oh, Commander Hansen. And then 7 shot her because LaForge doesn't call her Commander Hansen. She calls her Commander 7. And Commander 7 looked it down at Shaw and was like, out of respect, that's what LaForge calls me. And he was like, oh, so that's how you know. Yeah. And it kind of made Shaw realize that, listen, this is what she prefers to be called. What you want to be called. And so now, hopefully, in this episode's going forward, he'll acknowledge her as, Commander 7 of 9. Anyway, so what happens is that the impulse manifolds are opened up and the ship is pushed at an incredible velocity. Looks like Dr. Beverly Crusher's hypothesis was correct about what was going on. It was some kind of birth transformation. And so the ship is moving. Now, going back to the bridge, they have to make course corrections because they don't have the actual computer doing the navigating. So Jack Crusher Jr. is on the console and he's taking the command from Picard. And Picard is making manual adjustments, ducking and moving under certain type of asteroids. Now, what happens next is that after a while, they detect that the shriek is directly in front of them. Now, this is the interesting thing. What I negated to mention was the shriek was ordered to go back inside of the nebula after they had already crippled the Titan. Now, what happened was interesting was that the actual leader of the shriek used a Klingon blade, cut her hand off, and then it materialized into some kind of organic, replicated holodeck image. It wasn't clear. It doesn't tell who exactly it was, but it lets me know that whomever was over her was actually the real boss of the situation, or at least a secondary boss, because she was like, listen, I can't go back into the nebula because the deeper we go, it's going to affect the portal weapon. And he was like, whoever it was like, I don't care if it affects the portal weapon. You better go. And it was like, well, it's gonna affect, put my crew in my ship. It was like, I don't. It was like, so. And the captain was like, so basically, it's a suicide mission. And whoever it was like, I don't care if it's a suicide mission. It's gonna be a suicide mission if you don't do what we say. It's gonna be a suicide mission for your crew. It's gonna be a suicide mission for you and your ship. And so she capitulated and she complied. Interesting thing about it was she seemed like she was happy. Weird captain. Anyway, going back to what's going on with the Titan, as they're exiting the nebula, the shriek is directly in front of them. Now, Captain Riker does something interesting. He asks, are the tractor beams still on? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, basically grab a tractor beam that was, grab a small asteroid or relatively big asteroid that's from behind the ship. And what they did was they used the tractor beams to slingshot the asteroid to hit the shriek directly in front of them. It's a cool move. I ain't gonna lie. That was a reversal. It's actually surprising that the shriek didn't see that, because the shriek was very damaged by that move. And then finally, towards the end, they're clear of the nebula almost, probably a few hundred miles from the edge of the nebula. And they start seeing these little creatures with multiple eyes, like 4 eyes. They kind of look like jellyfish coming out of nowhere. And it proves the hypothesis of Dr. Beverly Crusher, proving that she is still competent 25 years later as an actual sound doctor, because she was able to determine that that nebula was turning into something. That nebula was a womb, and that nebula was giving birth to unknown creatures. And she had made the statement to seek out new life. And so I thought they was going to kind of like do the montage to boldly go where no one has gone before. But Riker was like, well, let's just get out of here. And then they went to warp. And they were finally free of the nebula. I'm talking about 4 episodes dealing with the nebula. Too long. Anyway, so this episode was certainly a good episode. I can't lie. I would give it a B, kind of like the previous episode. The only questions of contention is, 1, who was the captain of the shriek working for? 2, before I forget. At the end of the episode, Jack Crusher was in the bathroom. And what happened is that Jack was having some kind of image of the back of the wall turning red, and like some kind of like, I would equate it to like the Borg when you get infected, and is coming outward, but it's red. And then like he's seeing images of like red, and like I guess like an image of a city or a town being destroyed, and then like a red door opening. I don't know what that is. I hope it's not stupid or goofy. Anyway, but that's what happened. And he can hear his mother in the background, and then also he can hear, some kind of voice talking to him. I hope it ain't nothing stupid. I hope it ain't nothing related to like the changelings, because that ain't even their MO. I actually think it's something bigger than the changelings. I think the changelings are like the second actor in the group. The dude who was controlling the captain of the Shriek Vedic is like the third actor, but it's one big bad guy before them. I would say it got to be on the same par as the Q or something, because this is galaxy spanning. But nonetheless, that's my thoughts about this episode of Star Trek Picard, episode 4. And I gotta say that when you get an opportunity, by all means, check it out. Please like, share, and subscribe this channel. And thanks for hanging out with the Black Trekker. Live long and prosper.